Hey guys, and welcome back to a Psycho Sunday. I'm so excited for you to be here, and I am really excited about today's video. It's a doozy, I will say that much. This guy was just sick. Like, even the biggest serial killers that you can think of looked up to this guy, like got inspiration from this guy. So I just find him disgusting, truly. So that's why I'm bringing him to you on a Psycho Sunday, and let's grab our coffee and let's dive into today's video. This case is about Dean Corll. I think that's how you say it, Corll. It's C-O-R-L-L, and he is also known as Pied Piper or the Candyman. He was born on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1939, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, to his mom, Emma, and to his dad, Arnold. He was the oldest of two boys, and Dean's father was an extremely strict father. He did not mess around. And his mom was more of the protector type. She wanted to keep her boys safe. She gave in a little bit more than their dad. His parents fought constantly. They butted heads all the time, and they ended up getting a divorce in 1946. And that was just 4 years after the birth of Dean's younger brother, Stanley. So his mom sold their home, picked up the boys, and they moved to a trailer home in Memphis, Tennessee. Arnold, their dad, was actually drafted into the United States Air Force during this time, and their mom actually moved to Tennessee to be closer to him because that's where he was stationed, and she thought that it was really important for them to have their father in their life, so she wanted to make sure that they were close enough to him. Growing up, Dean was extremely shy. He didn't have many friends, and he was a very serious kid. He didn't socialize a lot with other kids, but he had a lot of empathy. He was known for being empathetic for people. At 7 years old, he found out that he had a heart murmur, which caused him to get fevers and things like that. So he actually didn't need to participate in gym class. He didn't mind that at all. His parents actually gave marriage another try, and they got remarried in 1950, and they moved their family to Pasadena, Texas. But their marriage only lasted for 3 years, and they ended up getting another divorce in 1953. It was a pretty civil divorce. They agreed on Mary having full custody of the boys, regular contact with their dad. So it was pretty civil, pretty easy. Not too long after the divorce, Mary actually met a traveling salesman named Jake West. They quickly fell in love, got married, and moved the family to Vidor, I think that's how you pronounce it, Vidor, Texas, where they had a baby girl. So that would be Dean's half-sister, Joyce. His mom and stepdad actually started a small business, family business, and they sold candy. They developed this candy company out of their garage, so it was really small, just something that they thought of, and they called it Pecan Prince. So I don't know if you'd pronounce this pecan, because that's how I pronounce Pecan Prince, or pecan, because some people call it pecans. But Dean worked day and night for his parents, all while attending school still. Him and his younger brother had the responsibility of running the candy machine and packing the product. Then his stepfather would actually take the candy on his sales route with him, and that's how they got clients. It was pretty smart. Dean was a really good kid in school. He was well known by the teachers, getting good grades, kept to himself, quiet, but really was not a bad kid at all. He did date a little bit in his teenage years, but he was really known as a loner. In 1958, he graduated high school, and shortly after this, his family moved to the northern outskirts of Houston, so the family's candy business could be closer to the city, because, you know, there's better business in the city. And they actually were big enough to open up a storefront. Then 2 years later, in 1960, his mom actually asked him if he would move to Indiana to live with his widowed grandmother. His mom was really worried about grandmother's well-being and health, so he went and stayed with her for 2 years. He did have a girlfriend while he was out there, and the girlfriend was so in love that she actually did propose to him, but he, turned her down. So right after she proposed, he actually left his grandmother's and he went back home to Houston to help his family with the candy business. He actually moved right into an apartment right above the shop, so it was really easy for him to go to work every day. Now, Dean's mom actually divorced her second husband in 1963, and she opened up her own new candy business. He named that Corll Candy Company. And Dean was appointed vice president, and his younger brother was secretary treasurer. Now, during this time, they hired a lot of teenagers to work for them. I mean, they're cheaper and just, it's easy to get workers that way. A lot of the teenaged males complained to Mary about Dean, that he would make sexual advances at them and say inappropriate things, but she kind of just brushed it under the carpet and never did anything about it. In 1964, Dean was drafted into the United States Army and assigned to Fort Polk, Louisiana, for basic training there. He then went to Fort Benning, Georgia, to train as a radio repairman before he got his permanent assignment at Fort Hood, Texas. Dean absolutely hated the military. It was not for him. It was not something that he wanted to be doing at all. So after 10 months of service, he actually applied for hardship discharge for his family. He claimed that his family needed him at home to run their business properly, that it wasn't doing well without him. They granted his request and gave him an honorable discharge. So after Dean got out of the Army and he was back home, he confided in a couple friends that he had realized while he was in the Army that he is homosexual. And he had a couple experiences there, and he, found out that he liked guys. But his friends noticed that Dean's mannerisms would change a lot when he was around teenaged boys. So Dean is spending like 100% of his time running this candy business because the competition with Pecan Print is pretty fierce. He's needed there like 100% of his time. They end up moving the storefront in front of an elementary school, thinking that this is perfect. Kids love candy, so it's a good business move. Not really a good business move for someone who is into teenaged boys, but no one knew that. Dean started to continuously give out free candy to young boys. He was then known as the Candyman. So Dean was in charge of employing people, hiring people, and he employed a lot of teenage boys. He even set up a pool table in their candy shop for the kids to hang around and the workers to hang around and, stay longer. He became super close with one particular boy, and his name was David Brooks. He was just 12 years old at this time, and he was in 6th grade. Now, Dean would do special things for the workers that they had. Now, keep in mind, Brooks was one that worked there. He was 12 years old, so that's extremely young. He's doing favors for these boys. He's taking them on day trips to the South Texas beaches. He made sure that David was always with him. David felt really comfortable being with Dean because he didn't mock his appearance or make fun of him in any way like a lot of adults did at that time. He just really enjoyed being with Dean. If David needed money, Dean would give him money. If he needed anything really, he would be there for him. And eventually, because that's the grooming process, did turn into a sexual relationship where Dean would pay David in exchange for sex acts. When David was 15, he ended up dropping out of school to go move in with his mother. His parents were divorced and he wanted to live with her. So whenever he came to visit his dad in Houston, he would also stay with Dean because he felt like that was his second home. In June of 1968, the family's candy business closed down and Dean's mom and sister moved to Colorado. Dean took a position at the Houston Lighting and Power Company, and this will actually be the last time that he ever sees his mom. So just 2 years later, on September 25th in 1970, an 18-year-old college student named Jeffrey Conan was hitchhiking with a classmate. He was dropped off on the corner alone near an uptown area of Houston. So Dean sees Jeffrey and he offers him a ride home. And this will be Dean's first victim. He kills Jeffrey. And later on, much later, when Jeffrey's body is found, it's actually said that he died from strangulation and he was wrapped in plastic and his hands and legs were bound. Around the same time, David actually walks in on Dean, assaulting 2 teenage boys who were strapped to the bedpost. Dean then promises David a car if he would just stay completely silent about what he saw. David agreed. He got himself a Chevy Corvette because of this. And then Dean later told David that he ended up killing both those boys and he would give him $200 for every boy that he can lure to Dean. David agreed And it was just 2 months later that he brought his first victim to Dean's apartment. He lured two 14-year-old boys named James and Danny away from a religious rally being held in Houston Heights. He took them to Dean's apartment. They were immediately tied up to Dean's torture board. He had a board that he would tie the boys to and torture them. They were raped, strangled, and then they were buried in a boat shed that Dean had rented. 6 weeks later, Dean and David both see brothers walking down the road together. Their names were Donald and Jerry. The brothers actually were dropped off at a friend's house, but the friend wasn't home, so they were walking back to their house. Both of the boys were lured into the car and they were drove to Dean's apartment. They were raped, tortured, strangled, and then buried in that same boat shed. There were a lot of abductions and killings around this time in that area. A lot of them have the same MO, except one had a single gunshot to the head. So in the winter of 1971, David actually introduced Dean to a young boy named Elmer Henley. He was supposed to be another victim, but after Dean met him, there was just something about him that he didn't think that he was a proper victim, that he actually wanted him to become another one of his accomplices. So he offered Elmer the same amount, $200 for every single boy that he can lure to his apartment. And he actually told him that they were a part of a white slavery ring in Dallas. Elmer ignored Dean's offers for months until his family became pretty hard up for money and he ended up taking the deal. So it was on March 24th, 1972 that the three men were together and they saw one of Elmer's friends leaving a restaurant, and they convinced him to get a ride with them, go back to Dean's apartment for some drinks and to smoke some weed. He agreed. So when they got there, Dean pushed him up against the table immediately and handcuffed him. When Elmer witnessed this, he attempted to talk Dean out of it. You know, he didn't want him to hurt him, but that backfired. Dean ended up killing him, and he confessed everything to Elmer and said that there is no white slavery ring. You're bringing me these people to do as I want with them, and then I kill them. He then told Elmer to bury his body and that he was a part of it now. And Elmer did as he was told. So these murders continued until August 7th, 1973. This day is pretty significant. This is when Elmer invited his buddy Tim to attend a party at Dean's house. And when he went to go pick up Tim, he was with one of his friends, Rhonda. She was there because her dad had gotten really drunk and he was being abusive towards her, and she didn't want anything to do with him. She just needed a place to hang out for a while, and Elmer actually took pity on her. He felt bad and he didn't want her to be alone, so he, asked her to come with them to go to this party. So when they got to Dean's house, Dean ended up being absolutely furious that Elmer would think that it was appropriate to bring a girl into his house at all. So he was really angry with him, but Elmer told him the story of Rhonda's dad and how she was being abused, and that he pitied her. So Dean went along with it, and they all drank and smoked weed and hung out for a while. So they ended up, passing out from either exhaustion or being too messed up. Elmer wakes up, he's gagged and bound, and he's sitting next to Tim and Rhonda, who are also gagged and bound, but they are still passed out. Dean tells Elmer that he is extremely disappointed in him and he needs to kill all three of them because he just can't believe that he would think to bring her. Elmer, of course, talks his way through this, and he tells him, I will take care of Rhonda. I will kill her. I will do the job for her, and then you can have Tim, and we can do this together if you just spare my life. So Dean agrees to this, and he ends up letting him go. And they drag Tim and Rhonda to the back bedroom. They tie them to the bedpost, and of course by this time they're awake, fighting for their lives and wondering what is going on. Dean handed Elmer a hunting knife and told him to cut her clothes off, rape her, and kill her now. So Elmer started to do just that. He started to cut her clothes off, and he also ungagged her so she was able to speak. And she asks him, is this for real? And he says yes. And she said to him, well, aren't you going to do anything about it? And for some reason, that question just really got to him. He said that just kind of snapped him out of it, and he realized what was happening and that he couldn't go through with this. This was not okay, and he needed to do something about it. Elmer asks Dean if he's able to take Rhonda to another room. He feels more comfortable taking her to another room. And Dean is completely ignoring him right now. He's in his own world doing his thing with Tim. Elmer took that as a yes. So he went and did that, and he actually got a gun during this time. So he came back into the room and he pointed the gun at Dean. He starts yelling at him to stop and that it's gone way too far. And Dean acted like it was nothing. He was not intimidated by him at all. He was one of those people that he stepped forward toward Elmer and told him, then kill me. If you want this to stop, then you'll have to kill me. He was daring him, he was yelling at him, and he just kept walking towards him. He really did not believe that Elmer would ever shoot him. He was just antagonizing him, and Elmer shot him right in the forehead. And what do you know? It did not penetrate his forehead. Dean is still moving forward, still coming at Elmer now. He pulls the trigger 2 more times and he hits Dean in the shoulder. Dean gets kind of like spun out of the room, and he's then walking through the hallway and he's hitting against the wall and he falls over. Elmer walks out of the room, so he's now going after Dean, and he shoots him again 3 more times in his back, and he kills him. He freed Tim and Rhonda, and they had a discussion about what the appropriate thing to do was. Like, he did not want to call the police because he knew his involvement in everything, but they actually talked him into it, and he agreed. He called the police, and he confessed to everything. He confessed to his own involvement. He confessed to David's involvement, where he revealed where all of the bodies were buried. And they found 25 victims, but the total number still remains unknown. They think it's way more than that. Elmer was later indicted and found guilty of 6 murders. And David, he attempted to say that he didn't really know what was going on and that he was a silent partner and they were the really bad guys and he didn't really have much to do with it, and that he wasn't present for any rapes or murders or anything like that. So he was indicted for 4 murders, but he was only found guilty for 1. Both of them were sentenced to life in prison. Elmer is currently incarcerated at Mark W. Michael Unit in Anderson County, Texas. And then David Brooks, he was incarcerated at the Ramsey Unit near Rosharon, I think that's called. I think that's how you say it. But he actually died on May 28th, 2020 from COVID. He was 65 years old. Around this time, a total of 44 young boys were reported missing in the Houston area. This case is, seeing the pictures of the victim of these young boys just completely tears my heart out. This was a sick man who groomed and ruined 2 young boys who became his accomplices. Who's to say that they wouldn't do something like that themselves? They were capable of it, but they were young boys when they got involved with him too. So essentially they were victims as well. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on this case. I think it's a tough one. They're all tough. But this is like so many people. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. It'll notify you every single time I upload a video, which I'm shooting for Wednesday and Sundays for Psycho Sundays. Having some technical issues, but I will get 2 videos up a week no matter what. Hopefully they will be on the days that I plan on having them. So look out for them on Wednesday and Sundays. Thank you so much for coming and having a coffee with me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.